Hello.
Have a seat.
Sorry, I'm just
messy because I'm just coming from working in the park. Where can I sit where I'm not in the way?
That is a good question.
You could,
You might want to sign in as well too, Liz. Thank you.
I haven't been in the new building yet.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, we lost it.
I'm gonna go one more time. It says we're live streaming to YouTube, so I'm gonna just double check.
Maybe we'll have, why don't you sit up on the side here, that works. Don't you think that's in the camera, or is it? We can flip around some of the chairs. That way.
We are live on YouTube, so we can get started whenever.
Off camera's good.
You come in. I'll let you kind of help direct us in terms of the camera. It's over there. So.
And we are live.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for bearing with us. We're very excited to have a hybrid meeting for the first time in several years. I will call this meeting to order. Look at that. We even have a gavel. This is a very monumental moment. There we go. Do I need to re-gavel now that we're recording? The gavel has been struck. Great to see all of you virtually and to see some of you in person. It's wonderful. We'll talk a little bit more later about having some hybrid meetings in the new year and schedule and everything like that, now that we have these opportunities available to us. And just an immediate shout out to Rob and Jen for making this possible and making the tech work, which I think is all of us know at this point is not easy when we're switching to a new system. Thank you for that. Let's start with our roll call, and I will call out names as normal, and so we'll just stick with our normal process there. So Keith Norris.
I'm here.
Alan Alexander, not seeing him. Woody Dukes, not seeing. Rick Hartwig,
Here.
live in person. Al Holland,
He's trying to get on right now.
okay. And Joan Lloyd
Here?
and Debbie Miller.
Here.
Wonderful. All right, so we do have quorum and hopefully we'll see Al here shortly. Let's move into our approval of the November 2023 minutes. Are there any edits or corrections to the minutes, or would someone like to make a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded. Any further discussion? All right, let's do a voice vote to approve the minutes. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. All right, the minutes have been approved. We will now move into our public comment period, and I believe you're here for public comment, is that
I
correct?
am. I don't
One-
want to talk to the side of your head though, so.
That's all right, we're gonna
Is there-
figure out the best option here. I think,
Is
were you
something
saying,
like this
yeah, if you wanna come up to the front here and let's have
Oopsie.
orders there.
All the stuff from my work day in the park. It's all muddy.
And please identify yourself when you come up that we have it on record, even though
Thank you. My name is Lynn Takata and I live in Ward 1 and the chair of Northeast Neighbors. So I came here originally to talk about one thing, but I'm gonna talk about two things. I've been working really hard on safety in the parks. And as you may or may not know, Inglewood Park was in one of the hot spots in the 5 square mile area that was impacted by shooting. So I've been working incredibly hard on this, and I've been using a number of different ways to do that, working with the community, removing graffiti immediately. So we've moved from being a hotspot to not being a hotspot anymore. On New Year's, what I celebrate is no one was shot in the park. So since 2020, no one's been shot in the park. But I'm really concerned about some of the budget cuts. And I understand now just today that the graffiti abatement's been reduced to only one person. And we've relied on both, I remove graffiti sometimes daily from the park. And that's what keeps that park from getting more graffiti and also being a hot spot for conflict. Kids come in, they're certainly welcome in the park, but we have visitors to the park between 10 and 2, and sometimes they get into conflicts, and then sometimes they have guns and they shoot each other. So I'm here to advocate for any power that the Parks Board might have in advocating for not cutting the graffiti part of the services, you know, in the parks. It's not an aesthetic issue. It's absolutely a life and death issue. It's a safety issue. One of the across the street neighbors has told me this story in 2020. She heard shooting in the park and she opened her door and there was a young teenager outside saying, help me, help me. He was covered in blood and he got pulled in. She pulled him into her house. And in the meantime, they were shooting in her house. So she still has bullet holes in her house. This is what we're living with. So that's stopped. That's not happening. But I'm hoping if you guys have any influence with the Salem Police Department, I understand there's only one graffiti abatement person now on staff. And Parks has been helpful, but sometimes graffiti abatement can get out to the parks more quickly. So that was one thing that I was here to advocate for. I think a lot of people in different parts of the city may not understand the impact of graffiti. But also park use, right? The more a park is used, the safer it becomes. So we have a good coalition of neighbors. I have people texting me anywhere from 6 o'clock in the morning till 11 at night with all the things that are happening in the park, which I may or may not want. So the second reason I was here is because one of the reasons I moved to the Englewood area is because of the park. It's just a treasure. And as I've lived here, there's been some push to put in a lot of hardscape or cyclone fences or dog parks. And it made me think that this park, which will be 100 years old in 2026, is deserving of preservation. So I'm hoping that the Parks Board will support, you know, having the Historic Landmarks Commission give it a designation of, you know, a historic landscape. I'm not sure about all the other parks. I think it's a really unique park, and probably over 98% of the shrubbery, plants, and trees are native. And we intend on making that at some point into kind of more of an educational feature where there would be a sign, hopefully indicating that this is a native landscape. And Rob was at the very first meeting that we had back in 2017. So I just wanted to let you know what we were thinking. It's a goal of the NEN board, and the park has over 95 species of birds that have been cited. There's a very dedicated Audubon person that writes down every bird sighting, and so it's just a treasure. And so I didn't know if you had any thoughts about that. I think the 1941 drawing by Lord and Scriver from Edith Scriver is now the master plan for the park. So I didn't know if you had any input or thoughts on that. I thought I would just.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Thank you for bringing both of these to the board. We can open it up to the board for thoughts and questions, especially Lynn or for staff. I mean, one quick question I have is just to clarify the graffiti abatement. That's so the police department, but then I know there was also would you just share kind of on the park side how that works?
So Parks does have folks, we have obviously staff that goes out and performs parks maintenance throughout the parks, excuse me. And so we do deal with graffiti issues as well. We do that in cooperation with graffiti abatement team because there used to be 2 folks, they've been reduced to 1. So we help kind of provide that support. But Lynn is correct, the actual graffiti abatement team is through SPD. And so they have oversight of that officer who helps support that. So she's also correct that sometimes they have the ability, given sometimes the amount of graffiti in a particular location, to be able to respond more quickly than our park staff who are trying to take care of multiple parks within their region. So they can be a little more responsive. So it would be impactful for sure if there wasn't that graffiti person. It would just put more responsibility, obviously, on parks operations to do that.
That's
Thank you,
helpful.
Jennifer. And one of the things is to get rid of the graffiti right away
Right.
and not let it sit, because as soon as it's up, there's other groups of youth that come in and you can see them looking, and then they bring more youth and they meet at the park as a place of conflict to settle their grievances. So removing it quickly makes a huge difference.
I think we're definitely all very much tracking some of these budget cuts, especially given a lot of those do impact parks. And we wrote a letter as the process was going through, just outlining our concerns there. And it was shared with all SPRAD members, the opportunity to apply for the revenue task force, which I think is another opportunity. I know that's on the revenue side, but really thinking about how we as SPRAD members can kind of be engaged in this process and lift up these priorities. I think this is a really important one that maybe wouldn't have been on our radar otherwise. And so I appreciate you bringing this for us to consider and think about as we're having conversations with council. And I know Councilor Varney's on here as well, listening in. It's something we can lift up.
I know people see it as being a Northeast Salem problem, but I understand that Bush Park and a number of other parks that are in different parts of the city also are impacted. But people may not understand what the graffiti is. Sometimes it's a name. It's just some name and it doesn't mean anything, but other times it's connected with shooting, drugs, and drug sales. So thank you very much for
Thank you.
listening.
Thank
I'll
you.
open it up. Did any other board members have comments or questions? Okay, well, thank you so much, Lynn, and we'll keep both of these in mind, and please encourage you to follow up with any questions and stay in touch on these, because I think they're both incredibly important and hopefully are things that we can follow up on as a board.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, I don't think we have any other public comment. Perfect. Council liaison updates. Councilor Varney, welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's good to see everyone, and oh, what a lovely building that Public Works building is. It is so fantastic. I'm so glad you're meeting in person. Yeah, that's great. Anyway, I don't have a lot of updates. I mean, there's so much going on. I'd almost like to just open it up to questions. We're moving forward with the revenue task force. So if you have questions about that, if you have questions about libraries, one thing that might be of interest to you is I'm one of the council members on the Wallace work group for Wallace Marine Park. And what we're doing is considering a means to conclude sheltering at Wallace Marine Park and what that looks like. And so this is it has counselors, I'm on it, Counselor Gwynn, Counselor Hoy, and Counselor Stapleton are on it. And then there are representatives from city, different departments, the police, legal, etc. And so we're just starting that discussion, and we're hopeful that in, probably March, April, we'll kind of have a plan moving forward, because we really need to address the camping that's going, the sheltering at Wallace Marine Park. And so that's a big, a big move forward that we've been talking about for a long time. In terms of graffiti, I'm really sad to hear the loss of a graffiti abatement position. It is important to stay on top of it. I realize that, and not all of it is gang related, but some of it is. Some of it is teens just going out and doing whatever. But we are seeing it in my ward in West Salem, Orchard Heights Park, some fences in some neighborhoods. It's definitely popping up in more places. So I just wanted to mention that. Let's see. I can't really think of anything else right offhand other than I would, over the next couple months, since I'm the liaison, I would love to hear from you in different ways as to your priorities for parks in terms of budget, because we start the whole budget process very, very shortly. And one of the big things we're going to start with is on February 12th, we'll be amending the fiscal year 2024 budget, and we'll be eliminating 41 positions at that time. Most of those positions were ones that we had planned on implementing with the city operations fee. There's just a lot of conversation going on and a lot of moving parts to everything. In terms of the budget committee, our first meeting will be January 10th. And then the revenue task force will actually be appointing the members of the revenue task force on January 22nd. So are there any particular questions, comments, anything?
That's really helpful. Thank you so much for that brief overview. And I think that makes a lot of sense on the budget. And I think that would be a good thing for us to talk more about, and we can circle back as we get into that process. But yeah, open it up for others, questions that folks might have about anything specific that's related to Parks and Rec right now being discussed at the city or council level.
Councilor Barney, can I ask a little bit more about the Wallace Working Group and kind of what's your particular, is that a group that's been convened purely to discuss the challenge, or is there a charter of that group that is taking it in a particular direction at this stage?
Well, it's how do I explain it? There are actually two groups. One is the work group that is made up of city council representatives and staff liaisons. And then there's a cross-functional team, which is made up of staff from the various departments. And so we do have a definite plan. I don't know quite how to answer your question. Some of the things, we had our first meeting, I'm trying to remember when it was.
And
Just
I
recently,
guess just
I think it was last week. Yeah, go ahead.
well, as I say, just a clarifying question. I guess what I'm asking is it an open discussion that is looking for that is exploring a number of different outcomes, or is it is the outcome kind of determined and it's a working group that's working toward figuring out how to implement that outcome?
I would say number two, the objective, I'll just read it off of the thing. It says, consider what the key indicators are to conclude sheltering at Wallace Marine Park without significant ancillary impacts. And then we will submit a report to the city manager. The group is advisory to the city manager, if that makes sense.
And you
And
said
so
to include sheltering, is that what you said?
Yeah, well, to conclude sheltering.
Include, okay.
Like start with a C, C-O-N-C.
Gotcha. I thought what you said originally is I thought you were talking about like building sheltering at the park, and
No,
but you're looking at reducing
no.
the amount of sheltering that's happening at the park. Okay.
This is to end it, and it's, as we all know, it's a very challenging problem. If we just went in and pushed everybody out and went in there and cleaned it up, we need to have some sort of something there to take its place so that folks aren't just moving in. I mean, that's one thing. And then there's the whole connecting folks with housing and services. I mean, there's so many different parts in this, and we're just, our goal is to end the sheltering in Wallace Marine Park, but we're involved in a lot of different discussions about what that looks like.
Okay, thank you. That's the direction I was hoping it was headed, but I had misinterpreted or misunderstood what you said at first. So thank you.
Thank you for clarifying.
I'm not hearing any other questions right now, but Counselor, one thing I wanted to propose or just put on your radar is, and we'll be talking about our work plan in a little bit. And one of the things we were looking at, I was thinking about it and I talked to staff about if we could find, because you mentioned the budget, if we were to prioritize maybe 4 meetings throughout the year, so quarterly, where obviously you'd be welcome at all of our meetings, but really thinking about those 4 touch points as maybe there's budget items and things like that, where we could come more prepared on our end as well and think about if there's 4 times out of the year, January, April, July, for example, and then would that be October? And then in those conversations, hopefully we would come with some more questions and there could be we can prep of things, these are some of the priorities in the budget process we'd like to see, et cetera. And you would always be welcome to come for regular updates, but I want to also be respectful of your schedule and if you can't always make it. But if we had those points that hopefully are on our end, we can come with some questions, ideas, priorities, and then maybe have that two-way stream of information you were just referencing right there. Curious how that would line up and if you have any thoughts on that approach.
Well, I think that's a great idea. I would love to have more input from all of you about what you would like to hear about. I mean, for instance, you had a presentation last month on the bond infrastructure bond, the prioritization for the trails, that kind of process as to what the criteria are going to be. And I'm on the bond infrastructure whatever committee. So we get that information and I'd appreciate input on that as well. But as to what you just mentioned, I mean, quarterly is fine. I enjoy coming to your meetings. Luckily, I'm available for most of them. I'm not going to be around after I get off of the screen here tonight, though. So because I have another thing I need to go to, and plus I can't be listening in on your board item presentation number 5. So I just am letting you know that I'm not going to be here later this evening.
That completely understand that, and I was, in case that happened, that's why I wanted to mention it now. And so not meant to be prohibitive of you ever joining all the meetings, but was trying to think about ways that, like you said, we could come and be ready and try and align those with some different times. So in those 4 times in particular, we can try and prep ourselves a little bit more and work with staff to think about some questions ahead of time as well. So I think that'll be good. And as we're going to be talking about it, that item is trying to set out some goals for ourselves throughout the year where we're giving feedback to you and processes and whatnot. So really appreciate you serving in this role, and it's just been such a change over the last year to have that liaison position. So thank you so much for making that possible.
Well, thank you. I really enjoy it.
All right. Well, thank you for sticking around, and I hope your next event goes just as well.
Thank you. See you all later. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
All right. Let's move into our board items and presentations. So our first one is developer's proposal to construct a portion of a street within the Hazel Green Road Park property. Rob, I think we're turning it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair McDowell. Rob Remenak, Park Planning Manager. Go ahead and share the screen so everyone can look at what I'm gonna pull up on this computer. Okay, tonight I'm here to talk to you about an item that's inspired by a development proposal that the city has received for a land use application, and this is a development adjacent to the excuse me for a second here, adjacent to our Hazel Green Road property. So here on the screen is a map of the city. I'm just going to orientate everyone to the location we're talking about tonight. We're going to zoom in here in the Northeast Salem area. And although it does not show on the city's base map, this large property right here is owned by the city of Salem as a future park property held in reserve. We call it the Hazel Green Road Park property. A couple other things I want to mention about the development of this site before I get into the details of the development proposal is Hazel Green Road is designated as a parkway. And what that means for the development of the park is we cannot take direct driveway access off of that street. There's rules about new driveways, and we, just like any other developer, will not be able to have a driveway directly off of the street. So we need a public street off of that street to provide access to the park in the future. There exists to the south some multifamily housing and some single family housing, and between those two, there are 2 streets stubbed to both our property and our neighbor's property. That is Courtside Street Northeast and Lunar Drive Northeast. So here I'm putting, these are the 2 street stubs. The last thing I'm going to highlight is when the city comes in to develop the site as a park, just like any other developer, we'll be required to do boundary street improvements. And that includes improvements to Hazel Green Road, which is underdeveloped. So we'll have to dedicate some of the park property for those street improvements. The street will have to be wider, we'll have to have sidewalks, and we'll have to designate that area as, over to the street as part of the development of the site. Now, with that kind of context, I'm going to switch over to some of the plans that have been submitted by the developer. And so here we are now. Orientate yourself again. Here is the north arrow. So north is to the left on this image. This is the city park right here. And the property line is right here where my cursor is. And here is the development site. The developer is proposing to extend Lunar Drive through their site and realigning the street pretty abruptly. And then the center line of the street would be the current property line between the two properties. And then also, so the hashed area here, both on Hazel Green Road and for the future proposed extension of Lunar Drive, would become dedicated public right-of-way and would be developed as streets. That's the developer's proposal here. I'm going to share you some other sheets in a second, but I just want to stop there and just say that from staff's perspective, we're looking for support tonight to support for this development proposal because one of those streets does have to be extended to Hazel Green. And we need access for our future development. And quite frankly, the developer is giving up more land than us. And they're also required to develop what's called a 3/4 street improvement. And so they will be developing not just their half, but slightly part of the street that's on would be the city's portion as well. This is this is an engineering plan, and I know you may not be used to looking at it, so I do apologize, but this is what they're proposing here is a development. When I mean 3/4 street improvement, the quarter that's missing is the sidewalk on our side. So they would develop the sidewalk on their side, the street, and then here you can see they're developing stormwater facilities to treat the runoff on the street. And so a portion of that improvement would be on the city's property under their proposal. Here is a cross section that I will attempt to zoom in on. So right here, this center line is the current property line. Again, they would develop a sidewalk, the planting strip, the curb, a travel lane, another travel lane and a curb, but then not the other sidewalk on the future park property.
Can I clarify? So you're saying there would never be another sidewalk, or that would be up to the city to?
This is what the developer would provide as part of the condition of their land use. And then when we come in, we would install that sidewalk at a later time.
So the goal ultimately would be 2 sidewalks.
That's correct. And likely they would plant street trees on their side, but not on our side and we would do that at a subsequent time. So I'm going to keep my presentation short and just open it up for questions. But again, I'm looking for support. And if I can suggest a motion, I can do that as well tonight. But happy to answer any questions.
I have a quick question on, you mentioned the boundary street improvement requirement. Where is that dictated? Is that like transportation system plan? How is that in terms of what has to be there of sidewalks? You know, are there bike lane additions? Are there width lanes, things like that?
Yeah, the standards are set in the transportation system plan, but the actual requirement for the city or for any developer to actually implement those improvements are in code. They're in the city's revised code as part of the Unified Development Code. And so when the city comes in for our land use approval, the city would tell itself, it's kind of an awkward situation that these are required improvements that have to be components of your project.
Is there room for bike lanes in those? I'm just thinking about future mobility things, our Salem, other TSP considerations happening right now, and knowing when this would get built. It's always good to try and include room for bike lanes if possible. So I'm curious how that's built in.
Hazel Green Road, I'm pretty confident we'll have bike lanes as part of the standard street section that would be required. Lunar Drive here is a local street, and bike lanes are not typically provided on local streets.
Okay. I think Debbie came off mute. Debbie, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had 2 questions. One is, how many acres is the park? And also the development, is that for housing or is that commercial, or what are they putting in there?
As I recall, the park property is 45 acres. And the development proposal is for multifamily housing apartments. And I recall it's over 400 units.
Is this the park where they're gonna put baseball fields in they were talking about? Possibly?
Yes, we have not completed a master plan yet, but there's been a lot of discussion about this being a great site for a sports complex.
Ooh. Separate question when you're ready.
Go ahead, Al.
The developer's street going north bends to the left and creates a bit of a segment, a triangular area on the corner of their property, separated from the main section. What is the plan for that little segment, that triangular segment cut off on their property?
Yeah, I'll share my screen here again.
I think it's on the southwest corner, if I have my directions right. Oh, I see some parking.
Here you can see there is an apartment building
Okay,
and parking.
okay, they're gonna use it. I just was
Yes.
wondering about that. Thank you.
You bet. And again, while I'm here, I'll highlight, you see at the, this would where the park's property, it's no longer park property, so you see they are installing sidewalks at that point.
I think it would sure look nicer if it was consistently done all the way through. But then, you know, that would mean we, the city, would have to pay for the sidewalks at the same time that other one gets done. Oh, well.
What is the timeline probably like in terms of when it would get developed on the city side after the developer?
I think the city could do it at any time. I think it would be better if the master plan was completed first. But you know, if funds were identified, the project could move forward at any time. That's the sidewalk infill. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there.
So it would probably, is that the kind of thing that would then become a CIP project and other things like that, most likely? So
Yeah.
it would
Yeah.
probably be several years now.
Yes.
Is there any possibility, I mean, just to Al's point about sidewalks, I know in West Salem, that's always an issue where you have like one side sidewalk and no one on the other. Is that something where there's pots of money that would be sidewalk specific that the city could tap into? I'm asking a lot of questions, so I'm
Yeah.
just curious.
Typically, no, there's not another source of funding.
Okay.
The sidewalk is a park development cost.
Okay.
So we think about D Street Park. The first thing we did after we acquired the property was put sidewalks at the city's park, at SDC Park's expense. Fairview Park, we have the improvements that have occurred at that site are primarily boundary street improvements. So we completed sidewalks around the site,
So
and that's all come out of SDCs.
Gotcha, very good point, thank you. Do you have a question?
Well, Rob, I guess the clarification to where you started this conversation is in order to really develop access to that park, a road needs to be built. And this is a way for this road to be built in a way that is primarily on the developer's property and being done at the developer's expense.
Correct. An alternative would be that the city would give up more land to extend countryside all the way through our site.
Through the park site.
Sorry, and this developer would then also have to develop Lunar all the way through their development site and they wouldn't be able to take forward the development proposal they have.
Right, and so this is a way to kind of consolidate that road building into one road in a much more efficient way that maximizes park property usage potential in the future.
That's right, as well as our neighbors' properties as well.
Excellent. Well, with that, I'm happy to, you said you were looking for a motion that provides general support for this proposal, correct?
General support for the development of Lunar Drive on a portion of the park property as well as improvements to Hazel Green Road.
Thank you. I had on my phone, that was hard for me to read. So I'll make a motion that SPRAB, I move that SPRAB recognize the utility and support the development of Lunar Drive Northeast along the eastern boundary of the Hazel Green Road Park property and improvements to Hazel Green Road Northeast along the northern boundary with portions of these improvements located within the park property.
Well stated.
Yeah.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a second. Do we have any further discussion on the motion? All right, let's do a quick roll call vote, just go through. Keith Norris? Aye. Alan Alexander is absent, Woody Dukes is absent, Rick Hartwig?
Aye.
Al Holland?
Yes,
Joan Lloyd,
aye.
Yes.
Debbie Miller,
Yes.
and I vote aye as well. All right, the motion passes. Wonderful. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. And good presentation. And I think the fact that most of our common questions were about sidewalks, is that the project itself is good and always nice to think about the minutia. So, very well done. And I appreciate the city finding a good solution there. Let's move into, state planning, goal 5 inventory of riparian areas. And we have Jeffrey Johnson here to give us a presentation.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeffrey Johnson, a natural resources planner with the City of Salem Public Works Department. And I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with you tonight about the Goal 5 Riparian Corridor Planning Project. Let me share my screen here. Okay, hopefully you have a good view of my screen now.
Looks good on our end.
Okay, great. During this presentation, I'll be looking at my notes as well as the screen, but if anybody has any questions, please speak up. If I don't notice, somebody just grab my attention, please. Be happy to discuss anything as we go. So I'm going to be presenting this tonight. A lot of this was prepared before I got to the city by Jennifer Mongolo, our senior natural resources planner. So I've just tweaked that a little bit, and as we've moved through the project, we've learned a lot of things, and so things have changed. So I don't know if any of you sat through this presentation from me before, but it's probably a little bit different than the last time. So goal 5, it's a planning goal, one of 19 that were passed in the 70s during a time in Oregon when there was a lot of population growth and it was putting a lot of pressure on land use. There were concerns about livability of cities due to sprawl and lack of open space. There were concerns about how this was impacting the environment and natural resources. There were also concerns that it would impact important land-based industries like timber and agriculture here in the state. So as far as us, the City Council has asked Public Works staff to begin working on the Goal 5 project, and our current task is the riparian corridor inventory process. So Goal 5, it has 14 different areas that are underneath it, and we are just focusing on riparian corridors for now. And Goal 5 specifically requires local governments to adopt programs to protect natural resources and conserve scenic, historic, and open space resources. And does this by setting up a two-part process. The first is an inventory of the resource at the local level for the riparian corridors. And then following that, there's comprehensive plan policies where they get the rule of law and the force of law behind them. So Goal 5 has a specific definition about what a riparian corridor is, and it's very standard with what riparian corridors are defined as. They speak about the area that includes the water resource, which is shown in pink there at the bottom of the slide. That includes streams, rivers, anything flowing down in that area, as well as the top of the bank and the wetlands. It then also includes riparian areas, which you can see here on the left and the right. And that riparian area, it's defined as the transition zone between that water resource and a dry upland resource. So it's kind of that area where the vegetation in the riparian area still affects the stream, and the hydrology of the stream still affects the vegetation in the riparian area. So this kind of all works together as a system. And these corridors are really important because of the functions that they have. They serve as both a filter and a sponge. And what I mean by that is that as water flows down the corridors, down the streams, it's clean, nutrients, pollutants are removed. It also happens as water is flowing into that area through the riparian area on the side. So it helps keep our streams clean, helps reduce, nutrient blooms and things like that reduce oxygen for fish. It also acts as a sponge. So you can imagine during flood event, this area gets a lot of water, and if you just imagine, somewhere up there that it's filled like a bowl, and that water's flowing down. Well, that water's putting pressure down onto the soil. The soil has pores and spaces, and so it's absorbing that water into the riparian area and into those soils. So it helps serve a flood control function by reducing kind of that peak flow because it allows it to spread out, slow down, and infiltrate into the riparian soils. And then if you imagine that water starts to drop inside that bowl, and as it gets lower than the water that's in the soil, that water starts to seep back out into the system. And so it's like a slow release for the water, so that when we have a drought during the summers, that it limits the severity of those low flows by keeping more water in the system during those times of drought. They are also very important for controlling erosion. They are very important as wildlife habitat in the city. They serve as habitat in places for threatened and endangered fish species. One moment, please. The other thing is they're just beautiful. I mean, these stream sides and these riparian areas with trees and shade, they provide an aesthetic and a beautiful place for recreation. It's a place that is cooler than the surrounding area, so it can be a refuge during heat events, and so it helps provide resilience towards climate effects that are coming and here. So they serve a lot of purposes for us, for wildlife, and so they're really important in the system. Now, the reason we want to plan for them is we want to make sure that we come up with something that is locally appropriate for Salem, that works, it's effective. We want to try to make sure we balance the needs of development and protecting our resources. And we want to make sure that we reduce uncertainty, because that's a big uncertainty is a big problem if you're going to develop property, if you don't know what you're going to get into, right? So that helps. I want to make sure that we save these areas so that they can have the values that they provide to the residents of the city. We want to make sure that the functioning of those continue to work from now and into the future as Salem continues to grow. And we want to make sure that we protect the habitat that we have. And not last but not least, we want to satisfy the Goal 5 requirements. So the process I mentioned before is kind of set up into two different phases. We are currently just in this phase 1 part of the process, which is the inventory. And frankly, it's the easier part of the process. Most of the decision making and kind of where the rubber meets the road happens in phase 2. So, but the first part is we need to inventory the resource that is here. And so there's two options that are given. And you can use one of these, you can use both of them, you can mix and match. So they're not mutually exclusive. But the safe harbor approach that's shown here on the top, it is basically limited to fish-bearing streams. And so fish-bearing streams, the term, it's basically comes from a data set that's provided to us from Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, where they have checked and they have determined that these reaches of streams have fish and are fish-bearing. And so you can go in and just take that as your inventory and move forward from that. It does limit the scope of what you're looking at. The other option is to go through what's called the standard process inventory. And basically you pick a method to inventory the riparian area. There are some commonly used methods, but the main thing is that it just needs to be defensible, consistent, and applicable to the wide variety of conditions that are occurring along our streams and riparian areas. And so it is basically a data collection, scientific sort of exercise where scientists using GIS as well as field collected data will go out and check out these corridors, inventory them, make some determinations about function level and significance and importance to the system. So let me give you just a little bit more detail about what each of those two approaches looks like. So the safe harbor approach, basically, once you've mapped and inventoried those streams, it provides two widths of buffers that can be applied. 75-foot buffers are applied to major rivers. So here in the city, that would only be the Willamette. And then the 50-foot buffer on either side of the top of the bank along the other fish-bearing streams. Now, this includes wetlands that are present along the river, directly adjacent, like you see here, shown as letter A. It also includes wetlands that fall within the corridor, but are not directly connected to the stream by surface flow. It does not include disconnected wetlands that fall outside of that corridor, as you see with wetland C here. Now, the standard inventory, we would inventory all the tributaries. It wouldn't just be limited to those that are defined as fish bearing. And basically the width of the buffer would be determined based on several factors, but one of the big ones is the height of the average height of the dominant tree species occurring in the riparian area. So it doesn't matter if that tree is a tiny tree now, if it averages 100 feet in height, the species, then that would be kind of what it's based upon, is more of the mature height of those streams. I'm sorry, was there a question? Okay, great. So back to that, basically it will give us data, it will give us information that allows us to make decisions based on what is actually happening on the ground. So why is this a big deal? Well, we have over 110 miles of waterways within the city of Salem. And of these, only 78 are considered to be fish-bearing streams. So if you see the map here, those areas in bright green are the fish-bearing streams, and those areas in pink are the non-fish-bearing streams. So some of these streams have water in them all the time. They just don't have fish. Some of them only have water from time to time. But they're very important. So it's not like if you look at the screen and you imagine one of these junctions of a pink line and a green line, what happens in the green line, it doesn't, what happens in the pink line doesn't just end where it hits the green line, and the green line is all by itself, obviously. So these tributaries that are non-fish bearing, they collect a lot of the nutrients, a lot of the pollutants sometimes as well. Runoff, and they feed them into these fish-bearing streams. So the health of fish-bearing streams is very highly related to the health of those headwater streams, or non-fish-bearing streams, as we're calling them here. So you can see if we just did the safe harbor approach and left it to fish-bearing streams, we would be missing out on a lot, and it would reduce the functionality of what we're trying to put into place. Okay, so this is our current proposed approach. This is not going to be locked in. We're still learning as we go, but our plan is to hire a consultant to do the standard inventory of all of the waterways, the fish-bearing, non-fish-bearing, and they will also capture wetlands that occur within those corridors. We will be continuing to do outreach very similar to this to neighborhood groups and associations and interested groups throughout the city. When this is done, we hope to have a map that inventories those tributaries. It has some buffers on them, and we want to provide that map in an outward-facing website to the public where they can comment on the map. And we imagine comments to be mostly related to, we disagree with, the function score of this because it's not really that functional because of A, B, or C, or you missed this area, or you included this and you shouldn't. And so once we go through that public process on the map itself, then the map will be finalized, and we will complete phase one by handing that final map over to the Community Planning and Development Department, where they're going to go through the phase two part of this process by creating a protection plan. We estimate right now for phase one that our time frame is going to be between 1 and 2 years. So I'm here to mostly speak about phase one, but I want to go back right now and just talk about phase two and sort of what can happen once we get to phase two. So we'll provide the map to community development. They will have options then, and they're kind of in two categories again. And so one is to just go ahead and take the safe harbor buffers and apply them to the fish bearing streams and be done there. They can choose that if they want. The other option is they can go through the standard process, which has more analysis, and they have to complete an ESEE analysis, which is environmental, social, economic, and energy analysis to determine what are the conflicting uses that would occur within this riparian corridor, what's the impact area that we need to be concerned about protecting, what are the consequences for those four resources, environmental, social, economic, and energy, and then what are the uses that can be allowed, and what is the area that we're going to allow those uses in? Are there conflicting uses that will be allowed under certain circumstances, et cetera? So that will involve a community outreach component and writing of code as well. So thank you very much for your time. Are there any questions?
I just had a quick question. It sounds like the standard assessment is more comprehensive than the safe harbor because it includes the non-fish bearing streams. Am I getting that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
It would include those 32 or so miles of streams that are not considered fish bearing.
To build on Debbie's question, then, is it essentially a cost question as part of the calculus? Why would you not choose the more comprehensive one? Is it cost and time and the factors that go into that?
Are you speaking to phase one, the inventory, or phase?
Yes, yeah, correct. To the inventory.
It is a cost. It is a cost to do that, and it does require, more collection of data and information that you have to then utilize, and so it can create more issues as far as it does make it more complicated, right? Because you're collecting a lot more information and you have a lot more information to use to inform decisions on the phase two side. Did that answer your question?
It did, yes, thank you.
Jeff, can I jump in? I'll just add it. It's also the safe harbor may be a little bit more simplistic. So if you think about someone who's coming in would like to develop their property and communicating the regulation to them, I just generally speaking, it's a simpler framework.
Gotcha.
Correct.
Jeffrey, a couple questions. You mentioned this is from state planning that was passed in 1973.
Mm-hmm.
Why is the city doing this now?
That is a question that we get asked fairly regularly. So my understanding, and if I'm wrong, Rob or Jen, please correct me. But there was a point when there was an amendment to the general plan, and there was a draft ordinance drafted for Goal 5 and everything kind of ready to go, and then it didn't get adopted. And somewhere around the same time, the state stopped basically checking up on Goal 5 or trying to get folks to do Goal 5. And so it sat for a long time and with no action on our end. And then due to some circumstances that happened in, I believe, 2021, city staff asked us to begin this process and to start with the riparian corridors.
Yeah, and I'll just add, so what I believe happened in around 2021 is the planning commission was hearing a case, and they basically brought up, why don't we have this inventory completed? And I believe then they communicate to city council, and the city council identified funding for this project.
Okay, and so, I mean, I'm natural resource guy. I like the idea of identifying this, but in terms of the public policy aspect, I guess is the state asking any sort of questions here or holding us to account for getting this done or directing it beyond in any sort of way at this stage?
The state they do not have a stick or a carrot, I guess, at this point for Goal 5.
That was basically what I was asking. Thank you. It was a good descriptor. So I guess, two other questions, to your point of these pink streams, connect into the green.
Yeah.
And they don't just end. Neither two do these streams end at the city boundaries. And I'm curious what the connection might be to, the adjacent urban areas, to Kaiser, to some of the other towns around. In terms of, obviously that's gonna be not within City of Salem regulations, but just in terms of kind of the comprehensive thinking, about the goal of protecting riparian areas for these streams. Is there a thought of how the city could work and make sure that the goals we are trying to achieve with the streams in our cities are not being thwarted by the efforts happening outside the city?
That's a very good question, and I don't feel like I am qualified to answer that question. Rob or Jen, does one of you have a willing to jump in on that one?
I can try to jump in. Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Mongolo, Senior Natural Resources Planner. I work with Jeff on this project and many others. I think I've met most of you before. So each community, counties and cities, are responsible for implementing their own Goal 5 or inventories and protections. So I am not aware what the city of Kaiser has implemented in their city. I don't know either if Marion County has already adopted any kind of riparian corridor protections, but our understanding they have not. We did early on in this project look at the potential or discuss the potential of working together or trying to bring them in and doing a larger inventory. It did not seem feasible. It's a heavy enough lift as it is just to try to do City of Salem at this point. So we've kind of just decided to work on this on our own, but hopefully us making this effort will encourage our surrounding communities to make a similar effort.
Yeah, I think that's a good desire and a good goal, right? As we're doing this, making sure it's, particularly if we go the more comprehensive route on some of these things, making sure we can think beyond the boundaries and help influence some of these other communities to install some of the similar thoughts and protections. Final question for you, Jeff. Thinking about kind of the initial inventory of 110 miles, have you done any sort of look at and thinking about kind of the implementation of phase 2 of this project, right? Any look at across that 110 miles, how many different property boundaries or ownership, right? How much of that is already kind of city owned versus privately owned? And just thinking about the impact of new ordinances that are placed out there on kind of private property owners that are already in these systems, and just kind of trying to get a sense of how much, what are these streams already touching, and kind of a rudimentary analysis there.
We have not done the private public analysis, but there, I believe, and I'm not sure if I want to make sure that there's a level of error with what I'm going to say, because I can't remember if it's 2,000 or 3,000. There's like about 2,000 acres, I believe, that would be touching this, but it might be 3,000. I'm sorry. The other number is the number of parcels that it touches. This is just the fish bearing streams. I used to have that in my slide deck and I've lost that number, but it's in that 2,000 to 3,000 range for both the number of acres within the 50-foot buffer and the number of parcels that fall within that buffer as well.
Jeff, I have your numbers here. I happen to have my folder. And so again, as Jeff said, just for the safe harbor corridors, which we kind of did an analysis based on center line, not the top of bank. So, but I think it's pretty accurate. There would be 3,220 parcels intersected by those buffers and by the riparian corridor. And that's 2,227 acres roughly. That does not account for the 30 miles or so of non-fish bearing streams.
Sure. Excellent, thanks. And like I said, just trying to get a sense of what the impact of the final kind of rollout on the phase 2 side of this might end up being.
And we considered that a lot of the fish bearing streams are in currently already developed areas. So we we considered that as part of our discussions, whether it makes more sense to inventory those or to just go with a set buffer. And because we have not captured all the wetlands, we need to do that standard inventory, even if we want to implement safe harbor, because we don't have we do not have an updated local wetland inventory that has all of those wetlands in there. So we have to do some field work and data collection, even if we were to just go with the 50-foot corridor.
Great, thank you. Thanks for answering the questions. I'm looking forward to seeing kind of where this builds out to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Jeff, for answering all those. Does anyone else have any questions? All right, hearing none. Thank you for that update. Really appreciate this work, and it's nice to know the city's able to do this and take this project on. I'm so excited to see this continue. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come back when we have more information for you.
Fantastic.
All right.
All right. Our next item is to talk about our 2024 work plan. One change on the agenda here is that it currently says recommendation, information, and discussion, but Rob found a good point in our bylaws that we actually need to adopt this tonight as the goal and guiding document for next year. So in the past, sometimes I think that's been pushed into January, but we really want to try and get this adopted today. So I will just take a moment. Hopefully you can all see this, and I'm just going to walk through. I actually went through this one myself and made some edits, and then Rob and Jen and Keith all looked at it. And so we've been able to make some adjustments. I would say the biggest thing that happened was some cleanup. There were some areas where things like the annual report and when we present to council were in multiple months or maybe not as reflective of some of the processes we're doing now. So just to note a few changes on here for you all. One is we've added, as I mentioned, when Councilor Barney was here, having 4 main council liaison updates. Once again, not to say that we can't have that opportunity, but really trying to make it so we're planning ahead, and those should coincide with some of the budget processes so we can all come ready to have a more robust conversation at each of those points. I've also included a planning retreat. It seemed like that October timeframe, although obviously we can push that to November as schedules get closer, but having that time to get in person now that that's an option again. And I've included a board parks tour. Some of you have been on those before. We've had a few that have been really wonderfully organized by staff to see some active projects. Summer is always a good time for that. So we have July currently scheduled for that aspect right now. Going into some of the other pieces, we have the budget, the CIP conversations. We've been trying to become more active on those, as all of you know. And then on community engagement, I did keep this, keep the neighborhood association engagement piece in through the summer into the early fall. It seemed like that was very well received by neighborhood associations this year. It did lead to very high levels of SPIF grants, which was fantastic. And I think that's something we want to hopefully try and replicate in future years. I've moved review of outreach materials to March, so that'll give us a chance to reflect and kind of share any lessons learned from the previous year's outreach. And then have included this participation in National Walk to a Park Day. Rick, I know you were able to join, and we had a great chance to go with several counselors and the mayor. And your dog, exactly. And so I think this is something we can talk about this next year, but I would love to have us all as board members working on some kind of planning around walking to a park and getting that idea out there more. And it can be low commitment, but I think that's something we can work toward. And then we also have some social media promotion built in there around key times. And then looking down below, most of this is fairly standard in terms of ongoing programs and reports. We'll talk a little bit about just reporting in general, but we're going to, in terms of trying to consolidate the reports, pretty much just trying to follow the council model. And then the other changes on here, Rick, you'll notice your name is highlighted on there. It does not mean we're voting you off the island. It simply means that you were up for reauthorization this year, which is, I believe, gone forward. And so
I've reapplied.
yes, and so that should be nothing to worry about, but that's why you were listed there, to make sure that you were in fact going to reapply and that we were hopefully going to keep you on. And then we also have the Fairview Park Master Plan revisit and refinement. So there is an opportunity for folks to sign up as liaisons for that. We'll talk in a minute about meeting times and the upcoming meetings, but I first want to pause there and see if folks have any comments or questions about any of the work plan items or anything that was changed. I know you both have made a few edits as well. Is there anything that was worth noting that I missed, or did I cover all the high points?
I think you covered all the high points.
Alright. So one thing that we had a chance to discuss that we wanted to propose was, now that we have this opportunity for hybrid meetings, we wanted to actually look at it all very holistically and think about meeting times. So I think one thing that we'd like to propose is actually shifting our meetings to daytime meetings once a month. And there's part of the reason is for Keith and I, we both have relatively flexible schedules in our workplaces where we can accommodate that. We also have young kids, very young kids, so where the evenings have been harder, and I know that there's sometimes other people have things in the evenings, there's other meetings, et cetera. But also work better for staff being in the building. And so we wanted to propose that we use our January meeting as an opportunity to try this. And we were thinking that 1 to 2:30, we usually budget for an hour and a half, it might go slightly over. To have 1 to 2:30, so it'd be right after the lunch period. It's an opportunity for us to try that in January, and then we would adopt that moving forward for 2024. Per our bylaws, we can set the time every year, and so we can adjust that. If it doesn't work this year, we can readjust that the following year. But that would be the goal, to try something new, see if midday meetings would give us more public engagement opportunities and also be easier for everyone here. Would it be possible if you could pull up the windows for everyone again, so I could just see if people are on there? There we go. And so I'd love to hear any feedback or thoughts on that. But once again, the proposal would be to keep it on the same day of the month, the second Thursday, but to trial 1 to 2:30 as the SPRAB meeting time instead of evening meetings, and see how that works.
I like daytime meetings. I'm retired. It's much better than evenings.
Wonderful. Joan?
I'd like to try it. It would suit me better, I think.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's fine with me as long as we're all retired. You know, I could not have been a part of this group if I was teaching
Yep.
middle school students at that time. You know,
Exactly.
That would be difficult.
Completely agree. And I that did cross my mind as well. And I think what we settled on is that with our current structure, this works. And so we have the ability to adjust if needed, but for the time being, it seems like we can trial this out. And then if a year from now, we end up with a slate of active teachers or folks that cannot accommodate, then I think we can revisit that conversation, hopefully. But
It works for me.
it seems like there might be, I see Al has a thumbs up. That sounds great. Keith, did you have any comments?
No, I think to Rick's point, that is something when this idea came forward that we talked about, right? But I think, so it's something for us to think about as new members get added to the board, just making sure we ask that conscious question. On making sure we can accommodate each of our members and their engagement in it, so. But barring that change in membership, I think moving forward, this works well for us at this point.
And we used to have a school district
Yes.
person on the board, and that doesn't seem to be the case.
Currently not, yeah, we have not, that role has been kind of in a little bit of a hiatus, just as this, yeah, so hopefully, in the future, there's still an opportunity for that, but right now there's. Well, it sounds like there's consensus there, which is fantastic. Sorry, go ahead, Al.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to say I'm all for this too, with the one caveat being, if our membership changes such that we have fully employed, less flexible folk, we might need to go back to an evening.
Yep. Correct. And I think, as Rob pointed out in our bylaws for me, that we right now have the ability to set our January meeting, and then in January, we will kind of set that out as continuation going forward. So right now, we're basically setting it for sure in January next month, and then hopefully we'll continue that to try it. And then if we have some big change in circumstances, we can revisit that. So I think then in terms of approving the work plan, we do need to get Fairview Park Master Plan liaisons. Is that correct? So we try and have at least 2 people on these master plan processes as an opportunity. Ideally, 2 people can show up, but if not, you always have 1 person that can join. Would folks be willing to look here and see if your name is not listed on other plans, perhaps you'd be willing to take on this new project? Debbie, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in Fairview Park. That would be good.
Fantastic.
I'm not on any other.
All right, and we have Rick. That was easy. And so I think we do need a motion as well to approve the work plan. And so that will be the work plan as amended and presented with Rick and Debbie as our liaisons for Fairview, and making the January 11th meeting to be from 1 to 2:30 PM in this building here. But it will continue to be a hybrid meeting, so if any of you are traveling or not able to join us, that is always an option as well. Yes, Joan.
I still move.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, let's do a quick roll call vote just to cover our bases.
Okay.
We have Keith. Hi. Rick.
Aye.
Alan.
Aye.
Joan.
Aye.
Debbie.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. The work plan is adopted. Well, thank you all. I'm really excited about this, and I'm excited that we have some really nice goals laid out, and we'll get to see each other in person in a few different opportunities, including the retreat. All right, our next agenda item is to talk about the annual presentation to council. So I will take this one as well. Thank you, Rob. I don't know if you want to zoom in just a tad for folks there. Thank you. So we had a good conversation. I had a conversation with staff and Keith about streamlining things a bit. I think many of you have seen previous reports, and they're incredibly comprehensive and well done, but we wanted to try and streamline it to about a page this time for hopefully having city council see some of this and have a higher chance of reading it, and also make it so we could translate this to a PowerPoint slide relatively easily. So what we did is we wrote out some of the really high points of what we worked on this year. You can all, I know it wasn't sent out in advance, so you all can take just a moment to read through that, but really highlighting things like having a council liaison, raising awareness through the neighborhood association outreach and the resulting SPIF grant proposals, park access opportunities. We've started looking at policy options and taking on those. We've participated in city processes like hiring. There's the University of Oregon Sustainable City Program, which we'll talk about in a moment as well, some more opportunities with that. And we've submitted a lot of support letters this year, which has been really fantastic, I think. Lifting up Sprad's voice to say we want to see priorities for different things, whether it's funding or grant opportunities, et cetera. So this is the proposed report. I want to open it up for feedback if there's things you feel like are missing on this report right now, if there's anything else you'd like to highlight or remove. And then this will become the basis for what is presented to City Council next month at a typical January meeting.
And if I may.
Yes.
Right now, staff is looking at the January 22nd City Council meeting for the presentation of the report. And so if you look at your agenda, our recommendation tonight is just information and discussion. There will be an opportunity for this to come back in January for the board to approve. So.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Rob, with that in mind, is this something we could get distributed to the board post meeting?
Yes.
Are there any immediate thoughts or questions, or would you all rather review it in the interim and come back at the next meeting with any edits? I see some nodding. Might ask about just the thoughts.
That's true.
Do you want to just like that? Yeah. Keith,
Well, I guess
the
just-
general approach.
I guess just this is, to Dylan's earlier point, this is very different than our previous annual reports. And so I guess just as kind of the gut check reaction from the rest of you on if this approach it makes sense and seems like a good one to try out for this year. And barring no negative comments, we'll take that as good endorsement.
Sure.
Cool.
Fantastic. I'm glad you asked the question, Keith. I think it's.
Yeah, I kind of remember the report being much longer.
Yes.
It was
usually
many
about-
pages.
It was about
Yeah.
7 or 8 pages. I
Yeah,
feel like,
so I'm going, okay, go to the next page, and you go, that's it. Well, it looks good. I mean, it looks quite complete and very to the point and not overwhelmed with lots of pages, I guess. But yeah, looks good to me. I can't think of anything we're missing.
Right. Joan, did you have a comment? Well, I will just say for all of us, one thing that's nice is looking at this. We've done a lot this year. And I think, as we note in the top here, I think that retreat we had just over a year ago was a really good opportunity for us to launch into these activities. So I think we should all be proud of this work, and it's really nice to see that how many things we fit into these bullet points and just how much work everyone has done. Okay.
Are we planning on another retreat this next year?
Yes, we'll do one. We'll do it in the fall this next year.
Okay, I thought I saw that on your
Correct,
sheet.
yeah, and then hopefully we'll do a summer parks tour, so there'll be more times to meet up as a group and do some of that as well.
Yeah. That's cool.
All right, so this will be distributed to everyone for additional feedback. And one point of clarification that I was going to bring up for folks is with reports. City staff, as with the new structure, as we know, there's been the kind of realignment of parks and recreation. Leanne, who sent out the agenda this last time, is now essentially the permanent SPRAB liaison. And so Rob and Jen continue to be available and excellent resources for us. But the new structure is going to be that Leanne is going to be the person that we should go to with things like this, edits for the report. If you hear questions from folks in the community, because Leanne can kind of be the operator, so to speak, where she can then distribute that out within the new structure. You know, there's this new flow chart of city folks, and she can help make sure that it gets to the right people. I'm sure that oftentimes will be Rob and Jen, but sometimes it goes to maybe Jennifer Mongolo, who's just joining us here. And the questions that I know we've had Beaver questions in the past, for example. So we have a nice opportunity there that will also help Rob kind of refocus on some of the projects, and Jen as well within their new portfolio. And so perhaps Leanne can join us at a future meeting to say hello and introduce herself with a face. But for now, just noting that email is someone you'll see more of. And if you have questions or thoughts about the report, please start with Leanne going forward, and we'll hopefully get to know her more into future meetings. So that is what we have for our presentations. And we will now move into any board member updates. I just want to start with two complimentary ones for staff. First is there was the turkey trot a couple weeks ago. I wasn't able to trot because my wife was working, so I had my twins, but I was able to go down and walk around and watch everyone running and just see how busy it was, which was great. And it was nice to see everyone be so active, and kudos to staff for putting that on. And also just want to say the light display looks fantastic this year. I feel like it's growing quite a bit and it looks really nice. Driving, walking, everything. It's a really good testament to Salem Parks. And I heard someone say, I didn't know Salem Parks and Recreation put this on, and specifically. And so I thought that was nice that it's getting more attention there.
Well, and just to piggyback, we added a little, so there's a little kind of a running reader board above kind of the archway by Santa's house that says Parks and Recreation. So
there we go.
Especially given kind of the climate in the future for Parks and Rec, we thought it was a good opportunity for that to kind of scroll through and folks to know that, we are actively participating in the community and how important we are.
Branding is a good move.
Yes.
So that's my main board member update, but I want to open it up to others if you have anything Parks and Recreation related. Joan.
Well, one slightly disappointing thing was that since last spring, I've been trying to get the 6 London plane trees on the North High campus designated as historic. They were part of the Lord and Scriver plan for foundation plantings in the front of the school building. And it took this long to find out that the school district does not want them to be designated as such. They feel that they've been taking care of them for all these years. And so it's kind of sad because they're gorgeous. But on the upside, I am so thrilled with so many staff members, so many employees of this city, and how quickly they respond to questions or comments. And in particular, Jen and the parks crews, and yeah, just delightful. And I'll have more specific things for the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board member updates before we move on? Yes, Debbie.
Yeah, I just had kind of a comment. If Rob and Jen, I email them sometimes automatically, and please remind me that like, I don't want to overburden you with things. So please remind me that that's shifted, and don't feel like it's being rude if I do that, because until I start doing something, I don't remember. And the other thing is, we at my park, Bailey Ridge Park, I noticed that there were some people out surveying recently, and I was wondering if anybody could update me if there's something imminent going on with the park. I know we were supposed to do some infrastructure.
Yeah, I'll give an update on, this is about Bailey Ridge Park.
Yeah,
The city survey crews have been out, and then they are working on a topographic survey of the park. The city is beginning the design of a phase 1 project there, and the focus of that project is on restoration of Chambers Swale, the creek that runs through the property, as well as some path development. We are very, very early in this project. Proposals from the actual design consultant that will be assisting the city were actually due today. And so the park plan will be reviewing those proposals in the coming weeks, and we'll be negotiating with the most successful proposer, bringing them online, and they'll be starting work sometime in probably late winter, early spring next year. And as their work gets going, we'll start providing updates to the board at that time. I'll just add, I've heard this from a number of your neighbors. This phase of the project will not be developing the multi-use court with the pickleball. So the components we are focusing on here is the restoration of Chambers Swale, and addressing the erosion issues there, as well as the habitat enhancements there, and path development. So paved path development within the park.
yeah, I know one of our neighbors was very adamant about that recently. But the other thing is that the swale is the most critical issue for the subdivision, because it's eroding the backyards, and getting that under control, I think, is a really big issue for the whole subdivision. So that would be great.
Perfect. All right, Rick?
I just have a question. When I took my dog to the dog park the other day, a couple of days ago, you go in and you have those fields on either side, which this time of year can be semi-flooded. But there was a group of about 15 to 20 people that were out in that field, and they were all looking into the water area, and I was wondering what was going on. Do you have any idea? Looks like somebody was talking to them, and they were looking out on the, you have no idea? Okay.
No, sorry, I don't.
Well, they looked very reputable people.
Hopefully planning good things for our future lives.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like they were ready to pitch a tent.
It may have been a birding group looking for water birds.
That was my guess.
Okay.
It's some sort of naturalist,
Is that a-
naturalist group out there.
Yeah, and I was wondering if that's something that we should know about, that we could participate in ourselves. I don't know.
Salem Audubon would probably be a good spot to start for that one.
Okay.
Al, did you have a?
I only had one report or comment to make in closing, and that is that it's very noticeable what the work that was done with the Friends of Trees project in Orchard Heights Park when they planted all the trees along the streams there. It is, and shrubs too. It's a real good project. It's going to look great as those things mature. And I think that shows a lot of effort that was put in. And Councillor Varney should be credited for encouraging that. She participated as well. Good work done.
I'll come in behind you to second that. I forgot, I missed the last SPRAD meeting, and so I wasn't able to update on some of the, I did a volunteer event with the Friends of Trees planting at Eagles View Park, which was great.
Right.
Good event, well coordinated, well implemented. Having the trees in that park has really enhanced it quite a bit already. So looking forward to seeing those trees grow up.
Yeah, and we've got an event coming up in January in Lansing Park. I think it's January 6th.
I believe so.
I believe it's in our packet. I think we have.
9 to 1
Yes.
at Lansing Park.
There's
40
a link
trees.
there at the bottom. Yep. Fantastic. All right. Sorry, go ahead. Did you have another one?
No, thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving into information reports, we have the MSPC work plan, and then we also have the Parks and Recreation Division report. Just to note a quick thing on the division report, what staff has suggested, and I think makes a lot of sense, is we will, as I mentioned, kind of take the city council approach where the report will be one big report rather than breaking it down by each, so you'll still get the same information. And then we'll basically open it up for any questions about the report, and then folks can call on staff. But instead of going through one by one, they'll help save some time and also make it so if Mylan or Jen isn't able to join us, that we're not kind of filling that spot each time. So that's gonna be just a simple way of streamlining things. But once again, same information, same opportunity to ask questions. But let's start with the MSPC work plan. That was in the pack. Yes, sorry, I went a little further down in my packet here. That was in our packet here. And I think we have someone with us. Yeah, yes, we have Kathy here. Did you want to add any comments on that?
Nope, just that I'm Secretary Treasurer of the Board, filling in for Maureen, who had other obligations tonight, and we're happy to prepare our report and submit it to you and get your approval on our work for next year.
Fantastic. And we don't need to make a motion on that, correct?
No, it's just for informational and just to piggyback on Kathy's comments. So the work plan is submitted, just so that you know,
Yes,
for
please.
procedurally is submitted to myself and Parks Operations. We review it. We work with them collaboratively if we have any concerns or anything that we want adjustments, and then before it comes to SPRAP. So we've seen it. So what the document that you're getting, staff is supportive of and concurs with the work plan that they submitted.
Fantastic. Well, my only comment is I'm always amazed how much you all do and how active the volunteers that you work with are. It's just a really incredible model, and I think it just speaks well every time someone goes by any of the parks that you operate in, that there's just a lot of great work happening, and I feel like anytime I'm out in the Bush area in particular, I see a new feature. So congratulations.
Yeah,
and
a
really
great
good work.
team. Yeah. The city has been doing a lot of the initial infrastructure for the new garden we're developing between the conservatory and the parking lot. And our hope is it's dry enough that they can get the paths graded this week. And so when we'll go in and start laying stones and gravel and get the planting done in the next couple of months.
Fantastic. Excellent. Any other questions for Kathy? All right, well, thank you so much for being here with us tonight and submitting a great work plan.
Thank you.
All right, well, now we'll move into our Parks and Recreation Division report. So did anyone have any items that they would like to flag or questions about anything shared in the report? Let's turn this on. Hearing none. All right, wonderful. Well, I will just say I unfortunately missed the demo that Rob, you were able to attend. So thank you for including some photos there. Folks may remember I was able to represent SPRAB at the initial kind of project planning down in Eugene. And so this is coming along nicely. And this actually leads nicely into a new business item, which is an opportunity to get engaged in the U of O process. So I just want to take one more chance. Did anyone have any further comments on the reports? Okay. So moving into new business, there's two items. One is the U of O update. So if folks have not heard, we have this great opportunity. Salem is part of this sustainable city initiative that U of O has. I believe we are the only city to have been chosen twice now, which is a very nice honor. And it's a great opportunity to really get lessons from across the world brought into Salem to improve our park system, to improve our overall community. And right now there's an opportunity with the Green Cities course around climate action work. And so this is about urban policy, politics, and climate change, and thinking about cities transitioning to a sustainable future. So there's a project right now about installing solar panels above parking and other areas at Gear Park. And what's happening is that this project is going to come up with recommendations and an emphasis on policy considerations, neighborhood inclusion and trust building, cost, and a comparative study with other projects. And so what staff are looking for is at least 1 to 2 SPRAB members that are willing to be involved in this project. So learning about the solar panel installation at Gear, the proposal, help provide input and considerations, and essentially be active in supporting this effort that U of O is so generously helping improve Gear Park and contribute to Salem. Rob can be available to add a little bit more.
I'll just jump in, and the specific commitment we're asking for is to attend 2 of the course meetings, so 2 classes in the middle of the term and at the end of the term. These critical lecture days where the students will present their work, and there'll be city staff there as well as the SPRAB representatives and potentially one of the city councilors, and we'll provide feedback to the students at that time.
Where will the meeting be, those classes?
Well, so this is a partnership with the University of Oregon, so I imagine it will be on the campus in Eugene. On that note, the volunteers from SPRAB will be welcome to travel with the city staff. We'll have a van. It'll be fun. We can all drive down together.
Party bus.
If you don't have anybody else, I'd be willing to volunteer.
I think it sounds like a great thing that I'd love to do. So I would like to do that.
Perfect. We have 2 volunteers. That's wonderful. And so, Rob, I imagine you can follow up with both of them. And if neither of you end up being able to make one, I would encourage we can have an email sent out and see if there can be a fill-in for someone, and I'd try and find a way to get down there myself if possible.
Do we have any idea when the meetings are going to be?
Yeah, that's my problem.
We're looking right now. Please hold.
Those 2 days are going to be January 25th and March 20th. And I will follow up with an email next week with more information.
All right. Our last scheduled new business, unless folks have others, is to talk about the election process. So I have hit the term limit on being chair, and so next month we will have elections, and we will need to elect a new chair to lead SPRAB. We have 2 options for the nomination process. Rob, are you okay if I just? Or do you want to?
Please.
Okay. And so we can choose either to have everyone. Essentially, we can open up nominations now and have them close next meeting, or we can make this a somewhat informal announcement and do all the nominating next meeting. The reason we would potentially open it now is in case folks were not able to join next meeting, just so people could put their name in, and you would still have the opportunity to put your name in next month. So wanna, I guess, first take a pulse check and see if folks have any strong opinions of which process we would go with. We've done both in the past, and I think the bylaws give us some latitude, but it's good for us to determine what that is so we can communicate that to folks that aren't here with us today as well. Hearing no strong opinion, I would suggest that we,
Well, I guess just to throw it out there, I realized earlier today, I don't think I'm gonna be able to make the January meeting due to some personal travel that I have. And I was planning to throw my name in the hat for chair at that point. So regardless of which process we go with, I guess if I'm not here in January, somebody else can nominate me during that time, I guess is the permission I'm granting at that stage.
I would take the initiative here and say that if everyone's comfortable with it, I would suggest we formally start opening up the process right now and say nominations will close prior to the vote at the January meeting, in which case, if we would like to formally, and I will put this forward myself, to formally nominate Keith today, so he is in the running for chair.
Yes.
Rob, per your reading of the bylaws, did we need a vote on that, or did you feel it?
Actually, the only thing I would like you to vote on is the option to open nominations tonight.
That should be a formal vote.
That should be a formal vote, and then I think you can informally, or you can then begin making nominations.
All right, I think, yes.
So I can make a motion to open up nominations for chair and vice chair for the 2024 year.
Correct. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? We'll do a quick roll call vote. Keith?
Aye.
Rick?
Aye.
Al?
Aye.
Joan?
Aye.
Debbie?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. I'm making you all vote a lot tonight, I really see. We've had quite a few. And with that, nominations are officially open, and they will continue to be open through the election at our next meeting. We can take nominations now. And I will take this moment to put forward the nomination that Keith Norris should be nominated as the chair of SPRAB. Done a fantastic job in the vice chair role, and I'm very excited to see you move into the chair role to take over in the year ahead.
Thank you.
Accepted. Fantastic. Do we have anyone else that would like to currently nominate themselves for chair? Okay, just
A lot of head nods.
had to make sure.
It's a bit of an evil chuckle there, Ed.
Yeah.
And so we do have the vice chair role as well. And so any nominations to serve in the vice chair role for the coming year?
Point of order, Dylan, are you have the ability to?
I do have the ability, and I would be willing if folks were interested in that, to kind of do a swap here and to continue kind of the work that Keith and I are doing. So
Okay,
I'd be
well, then
very
I
happy
would
to-
nominate you for that.
All right, accepted. Is there anyone else that would like to be nominated or put their name forward for vice chair? See more head nodding. So I think Keith and I have really appreciated the trust you've put into both of us, and we've enjoyed this process. So very excited to continue that. But nominations will remain open for next meeting, and we can have a vote, and we can have Keith submit some video testimony why you want to be your chair. Any further discussion on the election conversation for tonight? All right, hearing none. Do we have any more new business that folks would like to raise for this evening? All right, I'm hearing none. I do see one more note I was just going to communicate to folks is that the city has hired a climate action plan manager. And that individual, Juliana Douglas. So I know this is something that we've talked about, of getting more involved in the climate action plan and trying to carry out those recommendations. So that, I think, in the sense of new business, could be a point of order in future meetings where we can hopefully have the new manager join us and talk about recommendations. So just wanted to give folks an update that there is a new person on the team at the city. I have not had a chance to meet them yet, but hopefully we all can soon. Any further comments or discussion points before we move to adjourn? Hearing none, thank you all for a really good meeting, lots of voting as we noted on. And just as a reminder, we will be in person or hybrid meeting, but you have the option to join us in person, and it will be during the day at our January 11th meeting. With that, get to use a gavel here.